Hello, I'm Dane. Welcome to another episode of Dak Jusu. In today's episode, I will discuss how to dynamically bin rows in Power BI. So, itong post na to or this blog is in response to a chat in Power BI community chats. So, basically, what the user wants is to allow users to kind of, use the slider and then dynamically change the binning of rows. What the user did initially was to use a calculated column approach. However, that one wouldn't work because calculated columns, they do not respond to slicer selections. Same goes with calculated tables. Hindi sila aware na may pinipili kang value sa slicer. So, that approach will not work. But, subukan mo natin yung approach niya. First, gagawa lang ako ng what if parameter. So let's say 1 to 90, 0 to 90, increment 1, and let's say the default value is 10. So this will create automatically a single value slicer, which measure will be used in creating a calculated column, which of course will not work. So subukan na natin. Ito yung parameter value, which is whatever we select. No, that's wrong. Parameter value of 23. Gawin na natin 10 para medyo malinaw. So yung gagawin natin, gagawa tayo ng calculated column and we'll be referencing that measure in here. The new column, we'll call this calc column bin. Yung gagawin lang natin is ano bang formula ang kailangan gamitin? I think we'll be using quotient. Ano sabi ni quotient? Tingnan natin. Quotient. Ano sabi? Return the integer portion of a division. Okay, so I think this is what we need. So our numerator is value, which is this column here, data value, and our denominator is parameter, the parameter measure. Let's see if this is going to work. Okay, so we have some values and it seems to be working. Now let's try to place this in a visual. Where's that calc column bin and do not summarize. Okay, so it's 10. And how many rows do we have? Let's just count the rows. Count. So ito yung breakdown. Ito yung bin natin, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. Well, actually, we need to multiply this by parameter value para makuha natin yung actual bin because we have 0 and then 10, 20, 30, 40. That should be our bin. Okay, so we've got it right. And let's try to move our slicer. It doesn't update, right? So bakit meron siyang column bins? It's dapat 'di ba wala siya kasi nga selected value by default returns blank. Kaso nga lang kanina nung gumawa tayo ng numeric range what if parameter is nag-specify tayo ng default value. So anong nangyari sa formula natin, meron tayong default value of 10. So ayan, 10. And this is what the calculated column sees, 10. So ipapalitan ko 'to ng 20, mag-iiba yung bin natin. But this, of course, kung ikaw lang nasa Power BI desktop ka, pwede mong gamitin yung approach na 'to. Pero 'pag na-publish mo na 'to sa web, the users can't of course access your model. Hindi nila pwedeng ma-edit tapos hindi sila pwedeng gumamit ng slicer din kasi hindi mo magbabago ang values. Okay, so this approach will not work, but you'll be keeping this numeric range table. So, palitan natin. Oh, gawa lang tayo. Isa pang visual. Lagay natin si ID. Ayan, we have ID here. And we have our values. So, yung gagawin natin ngayon is we will use a dynamic approach. You'll be using a measure. So, yung bin natin kanina, ito, gawin lang natin siyang measure. So, column bin, let's say, dynamic bin. Let's make dynamic bins. And since this is a measure, ang yung measure is wala siyang row context by default. We need to aggregate our column one way or another, max, sum, count, whatever the aggregate is. But in this case, we just want to select the value of this sum of value, which is actually, meron sa data natin, pakita ko muna. Sa data natin is ascending, each row has an ID. So it doesn't matter whether we sum this or not. We will see just whatever is the value for the specific ID. Now, if your data doesn't have an ID, what I would do is I will just create an index column. So add column index and let's start that from 1. So we now have our index column. We'll call this ID2. Just in case lang naman walang ID yung ano natin, yung data. Okay. Loading. Yeah. So we have our dynamic bins, and this is supposed to be selected value. Value. And then we add that in here. So we now have our bins. Gawin lang natin 10 para medyo malinaw. Okay, 10. So dapat, or this. Ayan. So dapat pag ano nito, pag itong once it reaches 10, so dapat 10 na yung bin niya. Ayan. So now we now have our dynamic bins. The next problem now is we need to be able to use this bin as a category. Now, kung susubukan natin ilagay itong measure, i-drag natin siya in x-axis. Di niya tatanggapin kasi this x-axis, axis rather, requires a physical column, not a measure. So, anong gagawin natin? So, what we need to do is to materialize, that's the term, materialize this dynamic bins by assigning it to a table that has all the possible bins. So, gagawin lang natin is gagawa ulit tayo ng isa pang table. Kokopyahin ko lang 'to, modeling new table. Then, ayan. So, gagawin ko siyang bins. Then, let's say 500 yung max value natin. So, gagawa ito ng table of containing rows from 0 to 500 with an increment of 1. So, let's go back to that. So, ayan, 0, descending. Yeah, 0 to 500. Now, I want this value to have a different name. So, I'll use select columns. And then I'll use the word bin. And then that value column. So we now have our bin. Wala natin yan. Delete ko na din 'to. Okay. So next thing is uh, don't summarize. Ayan, so we now have our bins, and the next thing we want to do is to assign etong yung 0, 0, 0, 10, 10 dito sa value nito. So kung anong value nitong dynamic bins measure, dapat i-assign siya sa same value sa bin table. So kung 0 itong bins natin, 0 din dapat yung siya ma-assign. So ang gagawin natin, gagawa ulit tayo ng measure. And we'll call this dynamic bins materialize. So I want this bin to be summarized based sa ID natin kasi gusto natin row by row, di ba? So summarize columns, ID, and ID, yung original ID or your index kung wala kang ID. And then we'll add a virtual column called bin. You can use a different naming convention if you want, but for me as a best practice, I'll always precede the column, virtual column name with at sign. So I don't get confused that with the other physical columns. And then dynamic bins. Yan. So, ang ginawa natin is we summarize by ID. We created a virtual column called @bin, and the value of that virtual column is dynamic bins. So this doesn't end here. Next thing na gagawin natin is to filter this virtual table, and ayan, @bin in values ng bins natin. So we want to be able to filter this based on whatever value we have sa bins. And then we of course need to summarize or aggregate this. And ako interested lang ako sa count of rows na may ganyang bin. So I'll just use count rows. And then, yeah. Ako medyo ano to medyo I like formatting my measure, but I don't like to be doing that manually. So I'll go to DAX formatter. Yeah, DAX formatter. Then paste your measure or your DAX calculated table or calculated columns. So I'm missing a closing parenthesis. Ayan, I'll copy that and there we go. Next thing to do is add this measure to here. So as you can see, nawala na yung 1 to 9 kasi nga yung billing natin is ganito lang dapat 0, 10, 20, 30, 40. And if I change this to 20, the bins change as well. And I think covered naman yung um, lahat ng value kasi my data has 5,000 rows and then the total here is also 5,000. So that's covered. And here we go. Gawin natin siyang column para makita natin distribution. And let's make sure it's categorical. Gawin natin 10 ulit. 10. And then sort access by bin in ascending order. There you go. And then lagay lang tayo ng values or data labels. Yan. And we can even add a category. So category just A, B, C, D. category is legend. Ayan. And then we can add the total links. 15. Okay, so I hope you've learned something. Thank you for staying with me and have a good one. Bye bye.